Hi everybody, I'm Patrick.
And I'm Michael. You're watching another episode of Star Wars News and Views. So, if you haven't seen part one of our series on sort of the history of Snoke and who his identity could be, you can watch part one if you haven't, right here, click on the link. So now this is part two. And in this second part of our look at the identity and history of the mysterious Supreme Leader Snoke, we know him only from The Force Awakens, with the current version of the EU giving virtually no details about him. Our first part tried to give some explanations that treat him as a newly introduced character, and how that would work within the larger story.
Yeah.
But there are a number of theories fans have come up with, theorizing that Snoke could be a character we're already familiar with. Most of these are pretty big stretches and don't really seem that plausible, so much that the hashtag, hashtag your Snoke theory sucks, has become a thing. I mean, seriously, people have suggested he's Rey's father, a character from the Clone Wars, or Rebels, characters from the EU, a reincarnated Anakin Skywalker, a clone of the Emperor, a clone of Luke, Mace Windu himself, and everything in between. And none of these really hold up, so we've just been kind of ignoring them. But the one theory fans keep going back to is that he's actually Darth Plagueis, Darth Sidious's master. And this actually does have some merit to it. So there's a lot of videos on this subject, but we're going to be taking a look at maybe considering some angles that a lot of fans seem to forget considering. But we'll get to that in a minute.
We can go to a lot of detailed background on Plagueis, like so many people have, since his character has been fleshed out greatly in some of the novels of the EU. However, this is pretty much a useless thing to do, since almost none of it is currently considered canon.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore, really.
Yeah, but Lucasfilm has been integrating some of the old EU, like Thrawn, so to do a quick rundown might be helpful. Darth Plagueis is first introduced in Revenge of the Sith, where Palpatine tells Anakin a Sith legend about Darth Plagueis the Wise, who could influence midichlorians to create life and even save people he cared from dying, but was then killed in his sleep by his apprentice. The grammar of this film strongly suggests the murderer's apprentice was Palpatine himself, which was confirmed later in the EU.
It was developed that Plagueis was of the Moon species, which you see in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as part of the banking clan. They have these slender bodies and elongated heads. So publicly, Darth Plagueis is known as Magister Hago Damask II of the International Banking Clan, and he's trained by Darth Tenebris, who selects him because of his natural ability to manipulate midichlorians. And Darth Tenebris intends to use him to keep himself alive until the time of the Chosen One? Or something like that. I don't know, it's a bit convoluted.
Yeah.
Plagueis eventually kills his master, and while in his alter ego form as the Magister of the Banking Clan, he encounters Palpatine, who is part of a well-off family from Naboo with a history in politics, and he's secretly powerful in the Force, but he's been hiding it the whole time. And after secretly beginning to work with Plagueis to sort of rig politics, Plagueis considers placing Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor, using him as a figurehead to allow the Sith to rule again. After murdering his own family for political gain, Palpatine becomes apprenticed to Darth Plagueis as Darth Sidious.
Plagueis survived several assassination attempts, but his face is disfigured as a result. He finally reveals to Sidious that he has been experimenting with manipulating the Force using scientific means, realizing that midichlorians could be compelled to extend life and even create it. He eventually decides to reach out into the Force with Sidious's help to will a creation of their own design. But he senses the Force resisting and concludes it has been failed. Their plan to place Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor ends on election night, when Palpatine gets Plagueis drunk and electrocutes him to death using the Force. And we know the rest of the story from there. So, according to the EU, Plagueis is actually alive during the first half of The Phantom Menace.
Of course, none of this is necessarily true anymore.
Yeah.
All this was part of the old expanded universe, but it's possible that some, all, or none could be integrated into the current canon. And even if not directly, then a similar history which takes inspiration could be.
Yeah.
Could. So, why does everyone think Snoke might be Darth Plagueis? Well, for starters, it does explain how Snoke is strong on the dark side, and perhaps even how he took control of the Empire. If he was Emperor's master, and was secretly alive the whole time in some form or another, that's a very good explanation right there, and very simple.
Yeah.
What isn't simple is the fact that Palpatine said he killed him. But of course, being a manipulator, Palpatine may have been exaggerating or not telling the whole truth. And that's one reason why in our video on the Rogue One teaser, we speculated that perhaps the mysterious figure approaching a bacta tank guarded by Imperial guards is actually the Emperor visiting his master.
Yeah.
So Palpatine has secretly kept him alive all this time. And of course, Plagueis was a specialist in immortality and resurrection using his powers. It makes perfect sense that if anyone was capable of being brought back from death, it would be him.
Yeah.
At the end of the Darth Plagueis novel, Palpatine experiences a tremor in the Force that he fears maybe his master surviving death. It's kind of ambiguous the way the novel explains it, but that's what Palpatine wonders. So whether Sidious has him in the bacta tank as an experiment, as a form of punishment, or if he's continuing to serve him, that's up for debate, but it doesn't really matter which way that goes. The point is, it's perfectly possible for Plagueis to have been resurrected or kept alive. And while the details are still a bit hard to figure out, this also explains how he inherited the throne Sidious left when Vader killed him.
Yeah. Then there is Snoke's appearance. Plagueis is a moon who resembled Snoke's appearance with a humanoid but elongated head and a thin build. The facial scarrings are also similar to Plagueis. In the old EU, he is disfigured facially, mainly around the lower jaw, which isn't exact, but the film would be expected to play a bit loosely from EU faithfulness.
Yeah, it would be exactly.
Yeah. You could also argue he sustained scarring from Palpatine's attack, if that is still to be canon, or that his body is beginning to fall apart because the resurrection process isn't exact. Any of these could tie into the quote from designer Neil Scanlon, who says that he's sustained injuries over the course of his life. The fact that Snoke is also said to be very old and has been around from the time of the prequel trilogy is also consistent.
Finally, Plagueis was, in his alter ego, a member of the banking clan. He was rich, and this is how he helped fund the Clone Wars and manipulate politics and a bunch of other stuff like that. So if Snoke is Plagueis and has access to the Galactic Bank, it would certainly help explain how the First Order was able to thrive and build Starkiller Base despite existing at the edge of the galaxy out of the shattered remains of the Empire.
Yeah.
There are other, more subtle things that connect the two characters. We're introduced to him only as a hologram, which is similar to the Emperor, who was a student.
Yep.
And his theme music is nearly identical as the music in the scene where Palpatine tells Anakin of Darth Plagueis the Wise. And that title is also very significant. When Han Solo warns Kylo Ren that Snoke is using him, Kylo replies, "The Supreme Leader is wise," which is maybe like a coded nod and a wink at his true origins.
All these arguments are very good ones, which is no wonder the theory has lots of supporters. Of all the explanations that have Snoke being a character that we already know of, this is the only one that actually makes some sense, and ties the new trilogy with the previous two. Having said that, there are a lot of things that this theory overlooks. All the explanations and theories have therefore been some kind of reveal that puts a twist on things already familiar to us. This isn't what is necessarily likely to happen. It's simply the only way that any fan can give an answer without having seen the next two films. So we have no choice but to use material that is already out there. You know, Rey is Luke's daughter, or Ben Solo's twin. No, wait, Snoke created her. Actually, she's a reincarnation of the Chosen One, created by Snoke, who's actually Darth Plagueis. I mean, it's not a bad idea, actually, but it's only suggested because the only answers we can provide without inventing scenarios whole cloth have to necessarily use elements from existing films.
So here's why Snoke may not be Darth Plagueis after all. The idea that Plagueis is a moon actually came from George Lucas himself. And while the Plagueis design is similar to Snoke's, it's not nearly identical since Snoke is clearly not a moon.
No.
And the runes are different. But it wouldn't be a stretch to retcon Plagueis' design to match Snoke's in the future. It's just worth pointing out that the characters do look different.
Yeah.
But the main argument comes down to this. Force Awakens and the setup for the new trilogy was written by Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams, with Michael Arndt penning an early unused draft. Does anyone think these people even know who Darth Plagueis is? Despite Kasdan being deeply involved with the franchise, and despite Abrams being a huge fan of the series, there's never been any evidence that either of them have any interest in any of the expanded universe or any awareness of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt J.J. Abrams spends time in between jobs reading Star Wars novels.
Yeah.
But beyond that, the film itself seems to hold the prequels in a sort of subtle content, minimized. And while both men have probably seen all those films, their memories of them probably are not that detailed.
The only one that I noticed, nod to the prequels was saying that
Clones.
Yeah, Hux said my troops are superior to the clones, but that's like the only thing they mentioned at all.
And they mentioned the Clone Wars in A New Hope.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah.
So, you know, their indifference to the expanded universe is pretty obvious in the new films themselves, which toss the entirety of the expanded universe into the proverbial furnace, which is something that a lot of fans have been resentful of.
Yeah.
They have absolutely zero interest in honoring the expanded universe, and instead they're trying to build something original from the ground up, developing ideas themselves and going with what works best for their ideas of what the movies should be, even if that means countless EU novels are decanonized with only a single line of dialogue.
Yeah.
It's for that reason that Lucasfilm just threw in the towel and declared the old expanded universe officially decanonized wholesale, starting completely anew as the next films are built. So some of the elements of the EU are being retained, but usually that's within other EU products themselves, like Thrawn appearing in Rebels.
Yeah. Backing this up, Lawrence Kasdan apparently had no idea who Darth Plagueis is. During Comic-Con in San Diego of 2015, a fan asked Kasdan a question about Darth Plagueis, and Kasdan was confused about the whole question, had no idea who it was. Abrams was sitting next to Kasdan and stated that while it was too early to talk about the story, the answer was no. Of course, Abrams would never admit to it if it were true.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so it is easy to write off this as misdirection. Pablo Hidalgo, who is one of the senior members of the Lucasfilm Story Group that decides what is and isn't canon, later tweeted, "I think Larry Kasdan not knowing who Darth Plagueis is was telling. Again, one could argue conspiracy, but he didn't have to say anything at all."
And then following this, Andy Serkis was interviewed by Entertainment Weekly about the character and said that Snoke was, quote, very much a newly introduced character. Following the release of the film, Pablo Hidalgo clarified further, saying that Plagueis could only keep others from dying, but not himself. Quote, his apprentice killed him.
Yeah.
When later pressed that Palpatine is untrustworthy to tell the truth, he replied, quote, by that extension, that's the only proof this character existed.
Yeah.
Meaning that if we can't trust Palpatine, then the whole character could be a fake story invented by him to lure in Anakin.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only suggestion we have that he existed was him, like, the story being in the first place.
So it's kind of like a circular logic.
Yeah.
And then in May of 2016, he pressed further, quote, Sidious killed Plagueis, ascending to Master, as is the way of the Sith. And in another tweet that same month, quote, I said Sidious killed Plagueis. He killed him. Killed, as in to kill, like there was killing. So that's a pretty definitive statement by the keeper of the canon himself.
Yeah, again, you could claim conspiracy, and it's not like they would ever admit to it. Okay, you got us, he's Plagueis.
Yeah.
So a bit of distrustful skepticism is warranted
it's
here.
like trying to prove a negative almost.
Yeah. But here's the clincher. So when they were making The Force Awakens and setting up the new story and characters, they totally bulldozed the old material and went in every direction looking for original ideas. And this begs the question, why does Snoke's identity have to be some big reveal anyways? Why can't he just be why can't he just be Snoke, a new character? When the Emperor was introduced in the original trilogy, we didn't need to have some twist on his origins, other than the drama of finally seeing him, like meeting him face to face. The prequels filled in some of the backstory we already knew, but even Palpatine's origins and the entire the entire Plagueis backstory was fleshed out in the EU, with the films not delving too much into it at all.
But on top of that, who would even know this? Most people watching the film wouldn't really remember that one brief mention in Episode 3 or care.
Yeah.
I mean, like, hardcore fans like you and us, we may get excited at the twist of Snoke being Plagueis, but dramatically wouldn't add much even for casual fans. I mean, why even call him Snoke at that point? Just call him Plagueis. But the most revealing evidence comes from studying the film's making once again, which we mentioned in the previous video. Snoke didn't start out the way we now know him. Abrams and designer Neil Scanlon didn't want him to be old and decrepit like the Emperor. They wanted to differentiate him, so they went in all kinds of other directions. At one point, Snoke was conceived of as a woman, and they even pursued this in artwork. In fact, Snoke was being revised as late as October 2015, a few weeks before the film was set to be released.
Yeah.
So this means that any similarities to Darth Plagueis are purely coincidental. Add to that the fact that the writer seems to have no idea who he is, the numerous denials from everyone from the director, the actor playing him, and the Lucasfilm Story Group, and it really does seem like he's simply an original character.
Yeah.
Snoke took over the Empire, he can use the dark side, and he seduced Ben Solo as his apprentice, and that's really all one needs to know. I mean, there's probably some details left unsaid, but it's similar to when George Lucas was writing the character of the Emperor. not all those details were concretely figured out, knowing that there's sequels down the line that will break down some of the more specifics.
Yeah.
In fact, J.J. Abrams has said that the story was not set in stone at the time of Force Awakens' release.
We'll leave with one caveat here that might take the best of both worlds. Snoke clearly did not start out as Darth Plagueis when they were writing the movie, and the similarities in the final film seem to be coincidental. However, Rian Johnson, who is writing the next 2 films, could always take that and run with it. But like Abrams and Kasdan, it is pretty unlikely that Johnson was fully aware of the Plagueis reference, perhaps until fans and the internet kept pointing it out. Would that explain the mysterious back-to-tank in Rogue One? It's possible they've changed the direction to make him Plagueis. But if that's the case, wouldn't that ruin the twist for fans? If they are the only ones who would appreciate the twist, it's a bit pointless to change the story to follow their own theories.
Yeah, so I guess that's really the end of it until Episode 8 comes out.
Yeah.
While there are a lot of good reasons that support Snoke being some version of Darth Plagueis, it really does seem like those writing the films did not have that in mind.
Yeah.
And while the character could be changed to go in that direction, to the majority of viewers, it would have little point and involve a lot of explanation and stuff.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know. So fans try to connect Snoke to what we know from the past, because that's all we have to work with. But Snoke might be something more interesting than that. He might be something that we still don't have any understanding of because we don't know what we're in store for in the future.
I think that'd be even like more entertaining, I think, than to just do another reference to something that's already happened before, right? Like, I really don't think because they had any like intention of doing it and even know who they were, like who he was and stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like, personally, I think J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan and probably Rian Johnson too want to leave like a mark, and they're making these new films.
They want to make up their own stuff.
Yeah, they don't want to just use something that's been invented before by Lucas and was kind of just this write-off idea.
And in the expanded universe. Otherwise, they could have just followed the already existing expanded universe novels.
Of what happens after.
With Jason Solo and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but
so I don't know. I think it's they're gonna want to write stuff themselves, and it'll be more interesting if they just write their own idea of what happened.
Because fans are kind of keep bringing this up, it might have been like, what's this about Darth Plagueis?
Yeah.
That does make sense. So it's possible that the only way they would become aware of it was because it's become this own sort of trend now, and maybe then they could consider it. But having said that, I don't know. I don't really think so. I think it's more likely that...
Yeah, that's actually not... that's happened before. With the Saw, series, people made this fan theory that the guy at the first movie didn't die, and he was, helping Jigsaw out the whole time. And after that fan theory surfaced on the internet after, the 5th movie, they revealed that in the 7th movie. But, you think they had written that already? They decided to write it after finding out this cool fan theory.
So yeah, give us your feedback. I know there's lots of theories. I just read a theory the other day that Mace Windu is Snoke, and I was just like, come on, guys, who's making these videos? And they have 50,000 views. Really, Mace Windu is Snoke? I don't think so. He's dead. So leave us your feedback. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave us a thumbs up if you like this, and we'll make more stuff like this. And we'll see you next episode.